A student asked for an explanation of this sample problem. So let me read it to you. You need to create an app with a list picker. Well, that means that a list picker is one of the objects you can choose in the designer window. All right, list picker, simple enough. The list picker will allow the user to pick a list of objects. So those are going to be words. When the user makes a selection from that list, the image corresponding to that object, so if I chose the word battleship, a picture of a battleship would appear. The image corresponding to that object will appear along with the name of the object. So if I chose battleship, the word battleship would appear and the image of the battleship would also appear. If the app does not understand, whatever that means, the word, an image representing failure will appear. So that can be an X or something else, and a sad face will appear. The app will contain a means for the user to clear the screen. Well, it's not clear what this actually means, but it will depend on what the screen looks like. Now, I actually created the app, and this is what it looks like. This is my list picker, and there's my reset button. I click to pick a word, and there apple, bee, cat, and zebra, my choices. I click on apple, and the word apple appears along with the picture of an apple. Cat, great. Zebra, uh-oh, it didn't know zebra. Even though zebra was in the list, it didn't know zebra. And reset will clear this and the image. So that's how the app works. Let's look at the blocks. All right. There are several ways of creating this app, and the way I chose to do it first was to use a list of words. There's apple, bee, cat, and zebra, and a list of images. And oddly enough, they are in the same order. Apple's first in both lists, bee is second, and cat is third. But there's no image for zebra, because that's going to be the word that the app does not understand. This is one variable, another variable, and the third variable I created is index, which will keep track of which selection was made. Because the way this is going to work is when I choose something from the list picker, let's say the second item, I'm going to keep track of the fact that it's a second item by setting the index to 2 and then going into the this list and finding the second image. These are essentially parallel lists. So, how do you create a list picker? Well, you say to the list picker, hi, the elements that you're going to use will come out of a certain list. That's what this does. Before the list picker is used, the elements in the list picker are set to this list. After you make your choice, after you pick something, I can take the selection, that's where the value is stored, the value of what's been selected, and I can put that onto the screen as the text as part of the label. Now the next part may seem a little hairy, so let me make it a little simpler to look at. This says, find the position of what I've chosen in the list of words. This is the selection, so if I chose apple, this is the word apple, and it says find it in the list of words. So it would tell me it's the first one. Bee would be the second one. Cat would be the third one. And I say store that value in the global index. So if I selected zebra, it would store the value of 4 here. Now after doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine, is the value of index within this list? And the way I do that is as follows. I find the length of this list using this block. Length of list, and the list I'm looking at it has the list of images. If this is less than or equal to the length of the list, meaning it's 1, 2, or 3, I should be able to get the value. I will be able to find the picture. Now, the reason I use this rather than putting the number 3 in there is that the lists could change. And so if I increase these values, so if I add more elements here and more elements here, this piece of code would still work. So this is the test that I'm making to determine if I can find the image. If I do find the image, I'm going to go into this list of images, to this position, this index, and assign that b.jpg to the image. If I can't, I'm going to put the sad face that I've stored in my media as one of my media files. So that's how the image gets on the screen. And to reset, all I need to do is take the label, assign a blank to it, and do the same thing for the image. I put a white image on there. It turns out that the way I've set this up is that when the screen initializes, I'm doing the same thing. And while it's not required for the app, a good procedure is to make sure that any duplicated code, this looks like duplicated code because it is exactly the same, is stored in a procedure. So that if I go to here and choose a procedure, and I'm going to call this procedure clear screen, what I can do is I can now going to disappear this, and so I know that in both cases I'm doing the same thing. While this is a rather trivial example, if the amount of coding that had to be executed, number of blocks, was large, it's a lot simpler to read this type of code than if you had a large number of blocks in place of the procedure. Okay, so this is how the app works. Let me do this one more time. There you go. Pardon me as I fool around here. And so pick the word, zebra, unhappy face, reset, pick a word, B, pick a word, apple, and I'm all set. Now, you may look at this and say, this code doesn't look the way I think. What I would think is that if you have images which look like this, which is named this way, in other words, Apple has an image called Apple JPG, B has an image called BJPG, there's another way of doing the same thing. You might do it this way. I'm going to take this, move it out. I'm going to use a new variable called image name, and what I'm going to do after picking is as follows. I'm going to take the selection, which is going to be the word apple, bee, cat, or zebra, and I'm going to create the image name. So if I chose apple, using this block from the text drawer, I would create something called apple.jpg, and that would be the name of my image. If I chose zebra, I would be choosing zebra.jpg. The next thing I would do is I would look to see if that name is in this list. So, using this from the list drawer, the thing I'm looking for will be the name and this image list. So if I chose Apple, I'd look for apple.jpg. If I find it, great. If I don't, then I haven't found it. So here's the next piece. If the name is in the list, use that name to put the image on there. If it's not in the list, put the sad face. And let's see what the app looks like. It's not possible, trust me, to tell what the code is behind it by the way the app works. So we had two different ways of performing the same task. There are other ways, but these are the two that I chose. If you have any questions, let me know.